So 7 years ago, there I was, sitting on a stump in a shack in Nairobi, Kenya, where I was interviewing a man named Patrick. And he sold these metal items, which he either resold or he reshaped them into something useful. And his shack was really complex. You can imagine, here I am on my stump, that's my little seat, and I'm looking around, there's metal everywhere. Metal rims, metal pots. And as I talked to him, it turns out that his financial portfolio is just as complex as his shack. He was using mobile money, he was using banks, he was borrowing from friends and family, he was trying to send money home, he was saving money under the mattress, he was taking different loans, he participated in savings groups. This guy was super active financially. And that caught me by surprise because I thought, wait a minute, come on, this guy lives on $2 per day. How could he possibly need all those financial instruments? And then 5 years ago, I found myself in a very different place. I was in an apartment in Kentucky. And I was interviewing a woman, and I swear to you, I had the same conversation. She was working part-time, she was working overtime. Her daughter was working in a casual way. Her son was collecting cans for deposits. They sold at flea markets all the weekend. Her grandmother, who was living with them, knit and sold things. They had all these different income sources going on and just as much going on in their financial lives. They were trying to jockey their bills to figure out when they could pay them. They were trying to figure out, how do I take this loan so that I can pay that? Can I pay the rent a little bit late this time? Do we think we'll get away with it? It was that same juggling that Patrick was doing. And I do all my work in emerging markets. My company is an emerging market consultant in the area of financial inclusion. And although I'm American, I don't know the US very much. And I certainly don't know poverty in the US, and it struck me, how can this possibly be the case? Surely my brain's addled. This isn't the same conversation. But then lo and behold, over the past year, some evidence has come out to say, yeah, actually, no, that was the same conversation that I heard in Nairobi and in Kentucky. CFSI has been awesome, influenced the globe on their new thinking about financial health. And the next layer of this has just come out in a Gallup poll, sponsored by the MetLife Foundation, on financial insecurity. And it brought some validity to that observation that I had in those two very different places. It turns out that when you ask Kenyans about whether they are insecure or not, and to be specific, the question is, let's say you didn't have income for a month, and you had to rely on your savings and selling your assets. How many of you would last the month, and how many of you wouldn't? Well, in Kenya, the answer to that question is just over a half. Even though most Kenyans have mobile money, so you would say that nearly 100% of them have some sort of account. Now in the US, where 93% of adults have an account, it's just right around a third. Now on the one hand, 1/2, 1/3, yeah, they're different, right? But we're talking about a population in Kenya that has a GDP per capita of $3,000 per year, compared to a population in the US of just over 50,000. And an awful large percent of both say that they are financially insecure. And if there's one thing that we know from working with low-income households, it's that financial insecurity is a big driver of all the different ways that they manage their money. And it tells me something that really is starting to solidify in my mind, which is that though I am here speaking to you about our experiences in emerging markets, and you are working in domestic markets, we're trying to solve the same problem. It is a much closer problem than you would imagine, than I would imagine. And a lot of it, at the root cause, has to do with not income levels, those are different, but income volatility. So after I saw this Gallup poll results that I just mentioned, I went back to some of our data. I, with some colleagues, invented this methodology called the financial diaries, where we track low-income households over a year, and we take account of all the incomes and expenditures and financial transactions. And you might have heard about this at some point in the last few years with the book that was published by Rachel Schneider and Jonathan Murdoch called the U.S. Financial Diaries. And we've done about 10 of those financial diaries. And when I look into that data and compare it to the US, I notice 4 things. First of all, the income volatility. Let's say that you have income through the year that looks like this, like a straight line, which most of us with salaries, that's what our income looks like. There is just as much volatility in US households as there are in low-income households in emerging markets. And it doesn't always go up. It's not on the positive side. If you look at those households that have drops that are 25% below the annual average, they spend 3 months out of those 12 coping with income that's below what they would expect. It's the same in emerging markets and in the US. And then speaking even more, they've got the same type of strategies. These different income sources, the flea markets, the part-time jobs, the full-time jobs, the jobs on the side. There's all this juggling with income sources. People in the US have about 8 different income sources. It's pretty much the same in every emerging market that we look at. And even more so, we look at financial instruments, and we see that those are very much the same. In the US, you have about 15, same thing with emerging markets. So this brings us down to a big part of how to serve low-income people is about trying to help them with that volatility. We're doing a project now sponsored by the MetLife Foundation. It's called Optics in Mexico, Colombia, Bangladesh, and Vietnam. And we're working with financial institutions. Originally, we thought that this was going to be about providing low-income clients with more financial choices. But we quickly found out that is not enough. We need to treat the customer lifetime value. We need to not just provide them with new products, it's how we provide them with those products. And so, for example, with Acrimex in Mexico. In Mexico, you have lots of lending opportunities, but they are lent at 100 or 70% per annum. So our little Acrimex offers loans at 20% per annum. You would think that Acrimex would be cleaning up, but here's the difference. It takes 8 days to get approved for a loan from Acrimex, whereas from the commercial microlenders, it takes 3 days. So it's not that we're trying to help Acrimex compete on price. We're trying to help Acrimex compete on time and convenience to help that income volatility. So it's not as much what we found in terms of what product or a novel product or something new. It's about understanding your clients and what they really need. And oftentimes that has to do with respecting the type of time they have, the type of choices they have, the type of safety conditions they might be anticipating, the peace of mind that you can give them, and the type of control that they have over their financial lives and their lives in general. What is common about low-income people all over the world is that they lack that peace of mind, safety, and control. And they don't get it from their usual institutions that interact with them. They don't get it from the government or education, certainly not from security. If we can give them those intangibles, that creates a customer for life. And when you're in the business of providing financial services to low-income people, you need customers for life in order to make your business proposition. It takes a lot to get these low-income people to acquire your services. It's hard, it's expensive. You need to retain them. You need to capture their loyalty. But what we found is that by looking at the income volatility that poor people face and that they battle with every day, and that if you can underpin and help them solve that volatility, and at the same time give them those intangibles that no other service in their life gives them, that peace, that safety, etc. That's exactly where they become loyal customers for life. And that's a global solution. Thank you very much.